short introduction, I will invite Professor Chetan Gurada to start his lecture.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vivek, for um, introduction. And uh, am I audible?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Um, so I would like to cover up some topic from electronics and experimental methods. Um, as Vivek has introduced, I will not engage in that. I will directly continue with the experimental part. Um, yeah. Okay. Okay. So in electronics, either you go to NetSet or GATE course, you will get electronics. Basically, I have covered this from NET syllabus. So electronics part A is a core where you have a semiconductor devices, diodes, junction, transistor, field effect devices, homo and heterojunction devices, device structure, device characteristics, frequency dependence, and applications. Optoelectronic devices, solar cell, photo detectors, LEDs, and other devices. Operational amplifiers and their applications. Digital techniques and applications, where we have registers, counters, comparators, and similar circuits. A to D and D to A converters, microprocessor and microcontroller basics. So this is a syllabus which is given by the UGC, CSIR NET. Then there is a second part, electronics part B, which is also having the similar kind of thing. So where we have a transducers, temperature, pressure, vacuum, magnetic fields, vibration optical, and particle detectors, measurement and control, signal conditioning and recovery, impedance matching, amplification, where we use op-amp based instrumentation, amplifier, feedback, filtering and noise reduction, shielding and grounding, Fourier transform, lock-in detector, boxcar integrator, modulation techniques, high frequency devices, including generators and detectors. So this is the syllabus of electronics part, and there is some syllabus associated with electronics and experimental methods. So in part A, data interpretation and analysis, precision and accuracy, error analysis, propagation of errors, least square fitting, and part B again linear and non-linear curve fitting, chi-square fitting or chi-square test. These are the some of the error analysis techniques which are on which the syllabus is based. But as I just gone through some of the question paper, I found out that the questions are focused on certain topics. It is not necessary that they will always ask a question on these topics, but there are chances, and we have study probability, so we can see the things. Now I will begin with the electronics. This basic electronics course on which I am going to focus. I'm not going to focus on the this error analysis and other part right now, because of the lack of time, and maybe in upcoming sessions we will have some talks on it. So in basic electronics, we study Ohm's law from our childhood, Thevenin theorem, Norton's theorem, Kirchhoff's current law, Kirchhoff's voltage law. So I will just elaborate a little bit on this also. Ohm's law statement we know, but people can trick you with the statements. In electronics, though all these things appears to be very simple, the questions are set in a little bit tricky manner. So we have to be careful. We have to read the words, not the sentences, because we have to read the word and understand what the people want to do. And I will just give you some of the examples also. So Ohm's law, basically we know V is equal to IR. So voltage and current relation, which is proportionality. but this is a linear relation. When we go with the semiconductors, that also the part of this electronics, you will see the non-linearity, and then so this relation holds for the good conductors. Same way, we can write current is equal to V upon R, but all entire electronics is based on the Ohm's law, that we must understand. Also, in Ohm's law, or the electronics is nothing but it is a manipulation of electron, or it is a manipulation of electron to
Sir,
get desired output.
Chetan sir, sorry to disturb.
Yeah.
There is some unwanted noise is coming. Maybe you can remove your microphone and just directly talk from your computer, this speaker.
Okay. It's okay, fine.
Yeah, perfectly fine. Yes.
Okay. So okay. So the Ohm's law can be stated as V is equal to I by G, where G is a conductance, which is a reciprocal of the resistance. So 1 upon R is equal to G, or 1 upon G equal to R. So you have to be careful. Sometimes it can be asked, or many of the Thevenin theorem, Norton's theorem are based on all these Ohm's law relations. I is equal to, we can also have V star G. So we'll begin with Thevenin theorem. What it says is that any linear active circuit can be replaced by equivalent source, which is V Thevenin, with its equivalent resistor of the network, RTH, in series with the load resistance. So you can have a linear combination of resistor and power supply network, and that can be replaced, which is connected to the load, so which can be replaced by this thing. This is the old Thevenin theorem that we learned. Additionally, there is a Norton theorem which also use the Ohm's law and tells that we can any linear active circuit can be replaced by current source IN in parallel with RN across the load resistance. So it is like I into R that makes a power supply or voltage source, and then it can be deliver power to the resistance, load resistance. Kirchhoff's current law, Kirchhoff's voltage law, these are some of the so Ohm's law and this Kirchhoff's current law, Kirchhoff's voltage law are very helpful in solving many of the problems. So what current law states that the current flowing at any junction, the algebraic sum of current flowing at any junction is always zero. So if you have a junction of some resistor network, there will be some current from the sources, and there will be some current coming in and the current coming out. So the algebraic sum of this current, since from one path the current is coming and the some other path the current is flowing out, so therefore the algebraic sum at the current flowing at any junction will be zero. Secondly, same way the algebraic sum of voltages in a closed circuit is always zero. So when we close the circuit, the current starts flowing, and there is a voltage source which is providing current to the load resistance and other network. So this state that the voltage source, the algebraic sum of these voltages means voltage delivered by the voltage source and the voltage across the load resistance. So this way, depending upon the directions, so algebraic sum becomes zero, and later we will see how it works. Second part, that maximum power theorem, potential divider rule, these are the basic electronic principles that we have studied. Somewhere we have some rarely used Wheatstone meter bridge equations. That these are framing some question, and there is a Millman theorem, which based on the Ohm's law we saw, but in that case conductance and the power voltage source and the conductance, that part is added, and these are helping some of the questions in NET set exam also. So we have to focus on that. Series and parallel combination of resistor, capacitor and inductor is another part where people can be tricked by the arrangement of the resistors and capacitors alone and inductor also. So we have to do some practice on this also. Effect of DC and AC on resistor, capacitor and inductor, that is a additional part. So we have to understand that how this DC and DC response of resistor and AC response of resistor. So if you go to the Malvino's book, very old book, Principle of Electronics, where it states that normal conductor, metal conductor is having resistor, but when you apply DC, it will show the resistance. It will not reveal its capacitance or inductance. But the moment you start applying higher frequencies, then you have to consider the capacitance and the inductance offered by the conductor. So we can just understand in this case that the role of frequency, the role of AC, how as the frequency changes, automatically the material starts changing its property, and then its capacitor effect or the inductor effect comes into the picture. So whenever we study, we have to be careful in case of frequency effect on resistor, capacitor and inductor. So DC and AC do not produce any effect. It follows the normal Ohm's law for the resistor, but capacitor, when you apply DC, it is like open circuit, so it doesn't allow direct current to pass through it. But the moment you apply AC, it becomes conductor, and the conductivity or the impedance offered by the capacitor is inversely proportional to the frequency. At the same time, in case of inductor, it allows direct current, but when you start applying AC, it becomes insulator, or it starts resisting the flow of alternating current, and because of the magnetic field produced, back EMF produced. So what will happen that the inductance or the impedance offered by the inductor is directly proportional to the applied AC. And then when you think about a series parallel combination of these three components, you will get so resistor and inductor, for the series and parallel calculation you will get similar response, but for the capacitor the response is opposite or inverse. So let us go with some electronic component where there is a diode, BJT means transistor, binary junction transistor and diode. So we can see that we have a the IV characteristic of a diode, which is in the forward bias. You see the current starts rising slowly, and after the forward bias voltage, it starts following sort of Ohm's law or a straight line characteristic. And then as your voltage increases, then it may go into breakdown also. So in reverse direction, when you reverse the polarity of the applied voltage, it will follow some characteristic, and after that there is a breakdown region, and then it will go into the breakdown region. So and there are specific diode like Zener diode where you have a reverse bias characteristic at lower voltages, and it becomes good conductor. Similarly for the transistor, here I have not shown the applied base voltage. If you do not apply the base voltage, you start checking the IV characteristic, you may not get the characteristic which is shown in the figure here. But the moment you apply the base voltage or base current, actually it is a current driven device. So if you apply IB, automatically the IC will start increasing, the collector current or the total current through the capacitor transistor will increase, and then it will become constant current source also within the saturation region of the current. So this is little introduction about the characteristic of diode semiconductor devices. Now transistor is characterized by its IE, IC, IB. So it is emitter current, collector current and base current, and there are some parameters called as hybrid parameters, and one out of which alpha and beta associated with transistor, like these are the gains. So alpha is the ratio of emitter current to the collector current, and which is a very small value, because in practical concern, the IE is actually total. Sorry, I have done mistake in writing IE. The equation is wrong. IE is total current IC plus IB. So I just mistakenly used this ratio. IE is a total current, which is a summation of two currents, collector current plus base current, and alpha is a ratio of emitter current to the collector current, where emitter current is the total current, and beta is the ratio of IE upon IB. This is the gain of the transistor, right? And some of the question I have seen that where they have just changed the name alpha and beta. They have exchanged the name alpha and beta, and then said that beta is IE upon IC and alpha is IE upon IB, and now you find out the relation between alpha and beta. So that's why I told you that you have to read words, not the sentences. Even though we practice it, what is this alpha and beta, but sometimes you can be tricked in the exam, and then it will become difficult to guess the answer. So alpha by definition is IE upon IC, beta is IE upon IB, but we have to be careful. Op-amp is a device which gives you different level of amplification and helpful in different circuitry. So there are application in amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, pulse code modulation, A to D converter, D to A converter, log amplifier, integrator, timer, multivibrators. So op-amp is helpful in different devices, but once we start study op-amp, the characteristic and the use application associated with op-amp we have to understand. In all these electronic circuits, first we have to see how the current is flowing. Also we have to remember the characteristics of op-amp. There is a good book by Paul Horowitz called as Art of Electronics, so where you will see some of the characteristic of op-amp. That one of the thing that you must remember, that if you apply 1 voltage to the basic characteristic of op-amp is that it tends to minimize the input voltage difference. So the voltage applied to the inverting and non-inverting terminal, so it will alter the output such a way that the input voltage difference becomes 0, right? So the output V output is the resultant of the behavior of op-amp to change the to minimize the input voltage difference, that is equal to 0. And second case, that its output impedance is infinite. So sorry, input impedance is infinite, output impedance is minimum. So no current flows through the op-amp, it only senses the potential difference or voltages. So that is the characteristic. Now in case of digital system, we have to know binary and bits and difference between the bytes. So in binary we have a 0-1 system, but at the same time how the arithmetic and logic operations are done and what is the relation between them. Also the mathematics of the binary system, like 1 plus 1 is 0, 1 plus 0 is 1, 0 plus 0 is 0, and subtraction, how it is carried out. So 1 plus 1 is 0, and 1 is carried forward. So these kind of things we have to practice it, and then the question can be asked. Microprocessor, microcontroller, there are limited questions that I found out, but we must understand the difference between the microprocessor, microcontroller. So microprocessor is a unit which has a arithmetic logic unit and other peripherals, except the memory, means input, output, CPU and all these things. Microcontroller is a unit which is having microprocessor plus the memory unit. So it can have a RAM, ROM inside the processor. So that is the difference. Then the fabrication techniques which are used, depending upon the architecture, you can have a Harvard architecture and von Neumann architecture. So this is one, and also there is architecture based on the coding. So there is a RISC and CISC. So reduced instruction set, and you have a complex instruction set. So microprocessor basically like Pentium is having complex instruction sets. So there are very large amount of instruction sets. And in some of the ARM processor, you will find out this is a reduced instruction set where the complexity of the instruction is being managed by the processor itself. So you need not to do anything, and this way you can have a complex operations like multiplication or division in a easier manner in case of RISC microcontroller. So you will have two different sets of microcontroller based on the architecture and based on the coding. So Harvard and von Neumann architecture is a manufacturing process, pipeline structure and all these things. And instruction set, when we go for, then we have a reduced RISC system and CISC system. And there is a part called a transducer sensor. So transducers can be active or passive. The behavior of transducer and sensor is that they have to sense physical quantities and convert it into electrical signal. So to sense the response, you require Wheatstone meter bridge that I told you. So it has 4 arms, and then they are balanced. So Z1 by Z2 equal to Z3 by Z4 this way. So one of the arm is replaced by the transducer, and then it becomes most a sensitive device to sense many of the physical parameters. And to sensing physical parameter, when you have active devices, they can sense the physical parameters, and in return they can give you some current, voltage, or change in the resistor. Like if you use a quartz crystal like pressure sensor, if you apply the pressure, it will generate voltage. So it is calibrated with that, and then you can make it as a pressure sensor. In case of passive sensor, you require some external like thermistor. So you have to configure it, and then when you have to apply some power, external power, and then you have to see with the temperature how much change in the current is there, and then you have to calibrate. So these are the 2 categories, and they have their own characteristics. I have just kept 2 example for the logic gate. So this is a AND gate where you have a Boolean equation A dot B, and so which is the status of the output Y. It depends on the product of A and B input terminals. In case of when both the inputs are high, only that time you will get high output. So AND gate is behaving, or it is more sensitive for the lower inputs. That is what we have to remember, and that's why I have written Y is equal to A dot 1, which gives you A only. So A can be 0 or 1 or minimum value, so it will jump to the lower levels. So it is only 1 when both the inputs are high. That is the significance of the AND gate. The OR gate is a bit different. It is lean towards higher values, means maximum output. So its output is Y is equal to A or B, A plus B. So any one of the gate is high, it will directly jump to the higher values. That is the idea. And I have written additionally that Y is equal to A plus 1. That gives you 1 because one input is always high. So it doesn't look for the other input. Okay. So this is a digital device, but sometimes it can be configured along with RC network to get some different output. So we have to understand the behavior of each and every component. The way I told you what happens with the AC and what happens with the DC. Also, when we apply some voltage to the capacitor, the charging response is non-linear. So the capacitor takes infinite time to charge it completely. Also, there are some funny things like if you provide constant current to the capacitor, the voltage also increases linearly across the capacitor. But if you apply constant voltage to the capacitor, the charging will not become linear, but it is an exponential characteristic. So these are the behavior that we have to always remember when these components are there in any circuit. So I will come to the one of the question which was asked in NET 2014. It says that the IV characteristic of the diode in a circuit is given by some equation. So we see in the circuit that a 10 volt supply is connected to 1 kilo ohm of resistor. Some current I is flowing through the circuit, and there is a diode connected in forward bias. And the value of current I is equal to V minus 0.7 divided by 500 for V greater than 0.7 volt or 0.7 value, and it is 0 for V less than 0.7, where V is measured in volts and I is measured in ampere. The current I in the circuit, now there are 4 options. So to solve such a problem, we do not have it because our general consideration 0.7 volt is the voltage across this diode. So how to go about it? So it is asking for current. So now we have to use Kirchhoff's voltage law to Kirchhoff's voltage law. So this is one junction, and I'll just change that. So this is one junction and this is one junction. This is a closed network. So we can see now we have divided the circuit into 2 parts. This is input section, it is applying 10 volt, and this is the section which is connected. So this will, at this junction, you will get 10 voltage. So it is assumed that even if you replace this 10 volt by a open circuit, 1K resistor and the diode will also show 10 volt. That is the meaning of Kirchhoff's voltage law. So in a closed loop circuit, this 10 volt is balanced by the voltage 10 volt across this resistor network. So at this junction, the algebraic sum of this volt and the voltage offered by this part is 0. So this is the thinking behind this. And when we do this, what will happen? That so when we apply Kirchhoff's voltage law, so this becomes the minus 10 volt across this, plus we have this criteria given V greater than 0.7. So we will use the resistor 1000 kilo ohm resistor multiply by some current I plus the voltage across this diode, that will become 0. So minus 10 volt is balanced by the voltage across this resistor and voltage across this diode. So what will happen? That minus 10 plus 1000 into V minus 0.7 volt upon 500 plus some unknown voltage V across the diode, that will become 0. So if you solve this problem, you will get minus 11.4 volt plus 3 volt equal to 0. So in the next case, you can find out the unknown voltage V from this equation. So 11.4 volt divided by 3, that will become 3.8 volt. And therefore, if you now once we get the voltage value, now you put the value into the current value given in the equation. So 3.8 minus 0.7 divided by 500. So 3.8 minus 0.7, that is 3.1 volt, and divided by 500. So this will be I equal to 3.1 into 2 raised to 10 raised to minus 3. 1 upon 500, that gives you 2 into 10 raised to minus 3. So you can see that this is almost 6.3 milliampere, and the solution is C for such a question. So here you can see the basic Kirchhoff's law, Kirchhoff's voltage law is applied to solve this problem. Otherwise, it will take lots of time. Now, the second type of question is a signal of frequency 10 kilohertz is being digitized by an A to D converter. A possible sampling rate which can be used is. So, when we try to digitize some signal which is oscillatory, so we must know that we have to chop that particular signal. So the chopping rate must be greater than the frequency of the particular signal. So there is some criteria that we have to understand. The sampling rate is always greater than a signal frequency in general. This is a sampling frequency which is greater than the twice of the frequency under study. This is approximation being used. So in terms of time scale, if you convert it, it will become the TS, which is less than equal to 1 upon 2F. So if you use this equation, what will happen to find out the time, because the timing is given in microsecond and this is a frequency, so there is an inverse relation. So we have to convert, we have to simplify the problem. So 1 upon 2 into 10 kilohertz, that is 10 into 10 raised to 3, that will give you 1 upon 20 into this is nearly 50 microsecond. Now if you go with this criteria, TS is less than equal to 1 upon 2F, then what will happen that here we have a four option: 100 microsecond, 40 microsecond, 60 microsecond, and 200 microsecond. But TS should be less than or equal to 1 upon 2F. That is what justifying that it must be near about 40 microsecond, so that you can have a very good digitized signal of a 10 kilohertz frequency, right? So in this case, we have to just use our understanding that what we want to do. We want to have a better digitization of the signal. So we can chop the or we can sample the incoming frequency with very fast rate, and the fast sampling rate is given by the 40 micro S pulse. So this is the answer. Now I just told you that this is having variety of things that we have to understand. In this case, you have got a counter consists of 4 flip-flops, JK flip-flops, and they are connected like this. Now the first one is A0, then second one A1, from left to right, A0, A1, A2, A3. You apply some signal to this terminal, and which are given by 0, 1, 1, 0. So they are appearing 0, 1, 1, 0. And what will happen that you apply the clock pulse. JK flip-flop, this is a clocked flip-flop. So when you apply negative edge clock pulse, it will switch the output according to the input. So the moment you apply the input, what will happen now? Here we have to be very careful because the input terminal A0, A1, A2, A3 are actually connected with the output terminal of the flip-flops. Okay. So the A0 input is given to the J1, A1 is given to the K2, A2 output is given to the J3, and A3 is actually fed to the J0. So this is the cross connection. So very carefully if we see, so when we do that, A0 appears across the next J, A1 appears at next K2, A2 appears at J3, A3 appears at J0. So because of this, now what will happen that this A0 is fed by this signal, this is J. A0 is given to, so actually, okay, so there is some mistake, I think, this answer. Okay, so let us try to solve it. This is J0, sorry, J1, that becomes Q0, then this 0 goes to K. So sorry, this A0, 0 is given to J, so Q will become 0. Then this 1 is given to K, so Q bar will become 1, and therefore the Q will become 0. After that, this 1 is given to J, so this will become 1, and this 0, the A30 is fed to J, so this Q is going to be 0. So therefore, by carefully observing the connection, we can come to know that the output after first the clock pulse is 0, 0, 0, 1, and therefore we get solution B, that is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. So it requires careful observation, otherwise we can be tricked in such questions. So they are actually time consuming questions. Then there is another question where the inner shield of a triaxial conductor is driven by an ideal op-amp follower. So if you read the word ideal op-amp follower circuit as shown, the effective capacitance between the signal carrying conductor and ground is. So what is the role of op-amp in changing the capacitance? This is what they are trying to trick. So also it is mentioned that op-amp follower circuit. So it is a unity gain follower, and if you just try to understand the characteristic of op-amp, then it is just a buffer. It is an isolation system. It isolates input and output so that there is no any short circuit problem. That is the role of unity gain follower. So input is equal to output in the case of op-amp. So this is one of the thing, and the effective capacitance between the signal carrying conductor and ground. So this, what will happen to this capacitance? We cannot manipulate the capacitance of the conductor. So simply what we will get. So there are three options: unaffected, doubled, half, made 0. So this is a fixed system, and we cannot change the capacitance. It is carrying some signal. So what will happen, that since the op-amp is configured as a unity gain follower, it is a buffer, it is isolated, so it is not shorting these two conductors, and because of which it remains unaffected. So though these problems appears to be simple, but we have to be careful while reading this. And I have taken, this is apart from some solid state electronics. A sample of silicon has an electron and hole mobilities of 0.13 and 0.05 meters per volt second respectively at 300 K. It is doped with P and L with doping densities of 1.5 into 10 raised to 21 per meter cube and 2.5 into 10 raised to 21 per meter cube respectively. The conductivity of doped silicon sample at 300 Kelvin, which is asked, and then we have to find out what is the conductivity. So in this question, the silicon is having some mobility that is given. Then it is doped with P and phosphorus and aluminum with doping densities 1.5 and 2.5 into 10 raised to 21 per meter cube. So we have to understand first that what type of semiconductor it is. Either it is a N type or a P type. So first we have to determine the type of semiconductor from the doping concentration. So we can just see which is bigger one. So the aluminum doping is bigger one. So 2.5 minus 1.5 into 10 raised to 21 meter per meter cube. That will give you 1 into 10 raised to 21 per meter cube of aluminum doping, which is dominating. So aluminum is a trivalent impurity, which makes semiconductor P type, and this is what we study, that if the concentration of a dopant increases, depending upon the pentavalent or trivalent characteristic of a dopant, the semiconductor will become N-type or a P-type semiconductor. So first we have to identify that this semiconductor is becoming P-type semiconductor, and then we have to just see the mobility and the mobility of electron and hole. So the conductivity is represented by E into Np mu N plus Pp mu P. So N is the concentration of the electrons and the mobility of the electron, and Pp is the concentration of the hole, and mu P is the mobility of the holes. So which is nearly, since it is a P-type semiconductor, so the mobility of P-type means holes that we have to consider. So therefore E is the charge of the electron. So this gives you mobility equation that is E Pp mu P, and now by simplifying this we can get 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 into the concentration of aluminum doping, that is 1 into 10 raised to 21 per meter cube, into the mobility of the holes, not the electrons. So we have to cancel out the unnecessary terms and we have to consider the necessary terms. So the whole mobility, that gives you final answer 8 ohm inverse meter inverse. That is the conductivity of doped silicon sample at 300 K. So this is the so most of the questions are tricky and we have to read carefully to avoid the confusion. So I am coming to the last question of this thing because of the time constraint and the vastness of the syllabus. Also the way the questions are asked are tricky one. The voltage resolution of 12-bit D2A converter whose output varies from minus 10 volt to 10 volt is approximately. So we have to understand the given things are, it is a 12-bit D2A converter, and it has some resolution. That resolution we have to find out, and then we have to see within how much voltage difference its output is varying. So first we will calculate the resolution, which is given by 1 upon 2 raised to n minus 1. So it is a 12-bit, so we will use n equal to 12. So 1 upon 2 raised to 12 minus 1, that bracket, which gives you 1 upon 4096 minus 1. So resolution in this case minus 1 is because the lowest output is 0. So that 0 we have to rule out, or we have to consider, and therefore that one output value we have to subtract. So 4096 out of 4096 state, the lowest state is 0th one, and that's why we will get final answer is 1 upon 4095, that is equal to 2.44 into 10 raised to minus 4. That is the resolution given by this 12-bit D2A converter in terms of voltages. So if our voltage range is say minus 10 volt to 10 volt, so that is total voltage is V maximum to V minus V minimum, that is total 20 volts. 10 volt minus of 10 volts, so that gives you 20 volt. And then what we have to do is that we have a resolution multiplied by this total voltage range. So that will give you 2.44 into 10 raised to minus 4 into 20 volts. So that gives you 4.88 into 10 raised to minus 3 volts. So this is 4.88 millivolt, which is nearly equal to 5 millivolt of the resolution. So with this, I would like to stop my presentation. I have put my email ID for question answers also. So in future, if you have some problem queries, you can contact me on this email ID. Thank you for cooperation.
Thank you, Chetan sir. Now we will take some questions.
So there are a few questions. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So there are a few questions. One of the first question is, which is independent source current, which is independent source current or voltage?
In what sense, means?
I think
In
it's
what
not.
reference? Uh, all are associated with each other, volt, current, and resistor. But in terms of source, like transistorized source, when you design it for constant current source, so to maintain the constant current, transistor will adjust its voltage from that saturation curve that we can see it here. So in this diagram,
I think current and voltage, they are not really dependent on each other. They are still independent.
they are
And so
independent. They are
entity.
independent, but if you apply the voltage on certain device, then you will be able to understand the behavior of that device. So if you use constant current source um, and the load, so it depends load on the load whether it will remain dependent or independent.
Okay. So the next question is this is related to question number 1, which says in question 1, why can't we consider diode as a cell with 0.7 volt? Why can't we consider diode as a cell with 0.7 volt in question 1? Maybe you can go back to your slide.
I'm just bringing that slide. This is the first problem that we have seen. So it is our general observation. It is not a Zener diode which holds or the breakdown diode which holds the voltage fixed.
Sir, your screen share is off, sir. You can just post your
yeah, let me just share the
Thank
screen. Okay, so now it is visible.
Yes, yes.
Okay. In this case, this is not a Zener diode. You can see the symbol. That's why I told you we have to be, more observing. If it is Zener diode, we can use the breakdown voltage. This is not a Zener diode. This is a normal diode which is in forward bias. So it will hold some voltage across it depending upon the flow, current flow. So if you go back and see the diode characteristics also, what happens in this case? You can see diode in a forward bias, so voltage is increasing and the current is also increasing in the diode, right? So for that purpose we have to use this Kirchhoff voltage law, but we cannot fix the voltage across diode equal to 0.7 volt. It is only voltage needed to forward bias the diode so that current flow can be started, and after that the current and the voltage will increase across the diode depending upon the diode characteristics. So that's why this voltage is unknown for us. If you use that 0.7 volt only, then you will not get the desired answer.
Yep. Well, actually, right on the slide, there is a doubt. There is a question related to the answer. Is it 6.3 or 6.2? Because there is no 6.3 answer in the.
Yeah, it is. This is 6.2. Sorry, I did some mistake.
It could be a typing mistake. That's right.
Yeah.
Either it should be 6.2 or
6.2. This is my mistake. It is 6.2. I just typed in a wrong manner. 3.1 into 2 is 6.2 only.
Okay. In fact, I would like you to stay there on the same side. There are a few more questions related to the same question.
Yeah.
There's one more question. Why did you use KVL instead of the Kirchhoff's voltage law instead of Ohm's law? Here in the same question, instead of using Ohm's law, why did you use Kirchhoff's voltage law?
Okay. So there are certain unknown things. The 10 voltage is applied. We do not have the current values and the voltage across the Zener diode, right? It is like potential divider. Some voltage will appear across the resistor and some voltage will be across the diode, which is unknown to us. So we do not know how much current is flowing, though it is given by this V minus 0.7 upon 500. So still the V is unknown. This is not the 10 volts. The V is an unknown value which is given, and the supply voltage that we can denote as a Vs, it is 10 volt. So that's why we are forced to use this Kirchhoff's voltage law, not the Ohm's law.
Okay. Then there are actually many questions. Let me take one or two more questions. There is a question number 4. Question number 4. Maybe we can go to that slide.
Yeah.
For question number 4.
Yeah.
It says, have we solved that problem of op-amp? Was not clear. As a yeah. So
in this case. If what it says that you will get some different answer actually, not related to capacitance. This is a triaxial conductor driven by an ideal op-amp follower circuit. The effective capacitance between a signal carrying conductor and the ground. So then you may need some other parameters like how much frequency is being passed through that, and then we have to do the calculation, right? So the parameters which are given are limited only. That from the diagram we can see some signal is passing through the op-amp, and the configuration is like this. So and this is connected to a signal and the grounding of this thing. So the capacitor, what will happen that it will act like a attenuator. If you have a different configuration of the op-amp, it may change the signal flowing through the conductor, and therefore you will get some different answer. Instead of unaffected, doubled, or half, the totally the question will change to something different, not related with the capacitance or the effective capacitance.
There are several queries related to question number 3 on flip-flop. Can you just go back to question number 3 and maybe you can try to explain the whole question? And
okay. So I will run this question again. Hope it will be visible. So here counter circuit is shown. First we have to see carefully that A0 input is actually input of J1, and A1 is input of K2, A2 is input of K3, and A3 is input of J flip-flop. So when we apply given input 0, 1, 1, 0, so actually we are feeding 0 to J1, 1 to K2, then input 1 to J3, and the 0 to J0. So what will happen that A3 is given to J0, so 0, 0, 1, 1 will move, 0, 0 will be moved by 1, 1 flip-flop. But since this A1 is fed to K3, so the Q bar is 1, and therefore the A2 will acquire the 0 value because it is connected with the Q. So the output will become 0, 0, 0, and 1. It is the middle flip-flop where the output of the second flip-flop A1 is crossed to the third flip-flop A2, and because of which you are going to get this 0, 0, 0, 1 output. So after clock pulse, and then we have to just remember the properties of this flip-flop, that if the flip-flop is without clock, then whatever input you give, immediately it will take the output. That is the property. But the moment you apply the clock pulse, then unless and until the clock is triggered, output will not change. I think this will satisfy the question.
I think we have covered almost all the questions. Most of the questions, there were some 5 or 6 questions based on flip-flop which was answered. This is one query regarding giving some tips on operational amplifiers and transistor problem. But then, yeah, if you can give some tips on op amps and transistor.
Yeah, I'll just go back. So for op-amp, regarding the problem or
No, not problem, but in general, problems based on
component-based
and op-amp.
op-amp. So
are very widely asked in the exam. So just to know how to handle those, how to go about. This is what the question is.
Yeah.
I guess.
So for the transistor, first we have to understand that there are 2 types of BJT, NPN and PNP. So again, the biasing condition for the transistor is that emitter base is always forward biased, and collector emitter or collector base is reverse biased. That is the standard procedure. And then you will have a common emitter, common base, common collector configurations. So each configuration will have a different relations for voltage and current or the gain values. But normally common emitter connection is used. NPN transistor is mostly preferred. And main thing that you have to remember is that emitter base connection is always in a forward. Emitter base diode is forward biased. Then the transistor works. So then you have to remember the gain of the transistor, that is beta value and also alpha. And there is a relation between alpha and beta, that alpha is equal to beta upon 1 plus beta or beta plus 1, and beta is equal to alpha upon 1 minus alpha. So by knowing this relation, means there is an interrelation because of this IE is equal to IC plus IB. I have to just correct this slide. Then this is the relation. In case of op-amp, first we have to understand the characteristic of op-amp, that its input impedance is infinite, output impedance is minimum, ideal characteristics. Then differential mode gain is infinite, but common mode gain is 0. So CMRR is also infinity, common mode rejection ratio. But at the same time, when you apply differential input to the op-amp, and if it is biased, if the op-amp is not configured as a inverting amplifier or non-inverting amplifier, no matter whatever output you give, the whichever input is greater and to which terminal it is applied, the output will saturate to that direction. I mean to say that if non-inverting input is higher than the inverting input, then the output will saturate to positive value, depending upon the magnitude of the input of non-inverting terminal. If you go to the inverting terminal, you apply higher values, it will change the polarity and then saturate into that direction. So if you apply minus negative higher magnitude voltage to inverting terminal, output will saturate to positive. So it will give phase inversion. If input positive magnitude input is given to the inverting terminal, output will saturate to the negative saturation value. If you have a non-inverting amplifier or inverting amplifier condition, then you have to look for the gain. So RF for the non-inverting amplifier, it is minus RF upon RI, and for non-inverting, it is 1 plus RF upon R input. Also, people can attach some of the device like log amplifier where diode can be used. So the characteristic of diode, which is depends on the current flow. So we have to first see how the current is flowing. So I equal to I0 e raised to minus, there is some relation for the current also, omega t and all these things. So if it is a capacitor, then capacitor will charge depending upon the voltage difference between the input terminal and the output terminal, if it is connected across the pin number 6 and in one of the input pin. So then the behavior of capacitor comes. If input frequency is applied, then we have to be careful with the inductor and capacitor. So because they have a relation, the impedance or the reactance offered by the capacitor or inductor is different, and then we have to calculate and find out at what frequency what is the value offered by the reactance of the capacitor or the inductor, and then we have to substitute all these values. So we require lots of practice to identify the circuit, and whenever we see resistor network, Ohm's law or normal equations will work. When we have a capacitor and inductor where there is a frequency dependence, so we have to first see whether it is a input signal is applied or a DC is applied, and then we start solving the problem. So that is the idea. Means and it you once you do some practice, then it will become you will be able to become identify that this problem is like this, and you will be able to see. Additionally, I want to just emphasize that you have to monitor the flow of the current in all these components like transistors and op-amp. Op-amp do not allow current to flow inside the op-amp. So whatever resistor network you connect, the current will flow through that direction. Transistor is acting like a switch. So when base voltage, base current is applied, it will be on and it will allow current to flow through it. Otherwise, it will not allow. So the voltage current will acquire some different path, and transistor is switched on. So these are the two states we can have, or the current flow in the transistor is decided by the base current, and then from that relation we have to calculate the voltage out. So these are some of the tips I would like to share on this electronics part.